see data as hampering creativity going forward? What's the role for data in accelerating creativity? How do you think about this?
Well, when you think about music, right, it's the purest expression of creativity. And you think about taking data and infusing that into music, layering on what you know about somebody to give them the right song at the right time over and over and over again. That, to me, is the definition of data-infused creativity. And when you get that right, that's when you start to earn customer attention and you earn customer affection and you start to actually challenge old systems, right? We've disrupted the whole broadcast radio system as a result of that. But one of the things we learned at Pandora is data alone isn't sufficient to do that, right? You have to have data plus human engagement and interaction in order to be successful.
Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. I don't think anyone would think that data would ever replace creativity. It's a matter of how they work together. And it was interesting today listening to people talk and about how, on one hand, there's the warning of either you figure out big data or you're at your own peril, right? We're going to be, it's a sort of, there's an urgency to it. It reminds me, for all of us are probably old enough to have been through these technology cycles a few times since the late 90s of first it was the web or e-commerce, and you have to figure these out. But at the same time, what I wonder about is, and I thought of an article that was written, I think in the early 2000s, the Harvard Business Review, where the person provocatively said, does IT give you a lasting competitive advantage? So I was thinking today as listening to the speakers, will big data give us a lasting competitive advantage? If everyone in your competitive space has access to big data, understands their customers, knows their every thought, their every impulse, their every move, in the end, there's a leveling to that, which to me suggests that creativity will always be the differentiator. If I guess the question is, how do you act on the data? What do you do with the data? And that is, in the end, will always be a creative decision as much as anything else. Data in itself is not an end game. It doesn't answer the question.
And so how do you structure that internally within a company? You have the people, the data scientists who are mining this data, trying to draw interesting conclusions. You have people who might be incredibly creative who don't have the skills of a data scientist. What does the structure internally look like to help process the data and think creatively about what to do with it?
Well, we have a huge team of data scientists, and those data scientists are dedicated to really understanding, again, the combination of human interaction with the product, whether you're thumbing up or you're thumbing down, whether you're skipping a song, how you're engaging with new songs versus songs that you know and love, and constantly refining that. But that same data set, the data scientists also help us bring that to life for an advertiser. So we have a deep connection between data science and ad product and marketing, so that we can use that data in clever and creative ways to help marketers hone in on the right, not only the right audience person for a one-to-one marketing experience, but then to also take some of the attributes of that data and infuse it into their marketing campaigns. So you can truly have a personalized marketing campaign. So a simple example of that would be a campaign we did years ago for Bing, right? Which is when you're listening to a song, you're listening to Lady Gaga. Well, Bing would take the song of Lady Gaga, immediately pull in search results for Lady Gaga into an ad unit, and all of a sudden they're opening up a whole new discovery about the artist that you love within an ad. And it was a really great example of leveraging data in an interesting way.
Thomas, how do you see that playing out?
It's interesting, and I think it's because being in the agency world, where you have creative people and analysts and strategists and researchers, historically agencies approach things, and most folks approach things in a very linear fashion, where you'd have data, you have a data set, you do an analysis of the data set, you would lead you to a conclusion or a strategy, which then you'd act on. And I think what we're finding at Landor, I think many folks are finding this, is that we need to have much more of a software mindset, where we're similar to what Heidi's describing, where there's more of a dialogue between data and creativity. You're working hypotheses, you're testing, almost a call and answer approach. It's a bit more of a co-creation back and forth between insights and quantitative insights and then answers to those insights.
Heidi, for you, what doesn't the data give you? What is missing when you're getting all of this information? What don't you have? How can you find it? What do you see as sort of the shortcoming of all the data that you're gathering?
It's interesting because we do have an incredible amount of data, so much so that people often ask us if we're a data company or a music company, and we're a music company first, but we happen to sit on all this data. But one of the advantages that we have is we have this first-party data set. So we have registration data, your age, your geo, your gender. We have your device data. We're in over 1,000 devices, so we know if you're listening on, on your Sonos at home, on your, your iPhone, on your web, in your car, or, on your Samsung refrigerator. And we have that identity across all of those different devices. We know what time of day, what day of week you're listening, what music you're listening to. So there's a lot of richness to what we can provide, but we also augment that data. So what don't we have? We work with external partners, Census, et cetera, to augment it so that it can help us build predictive algorithms for advertising around people's interests in or intent to buy a car or intent to vote a particular way, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, et cetera. Just makes our targeting smarter.
Interesting. What about you, Thomas? What's missing here?
I mean, I think for me, I always have a struggle with this, like an underlying assumption around big data, maybe coupled with like 3D printing or dynamic advertising or the sort of answers to it, of that if we can totally uncover what somebody wants and we can deliver them exactly what they want, then the role will be perfect. We'll have this kind of virtuous, frictionless delivery where we understand the needs and motivations of Heidi exactly, and we can deliver exactly what Heidi wants at any moment that Heidi wants it. The problem I have with that is I don't think a lot of people want what they say they want. And I think this is the interesting sort of ineffable quality of marketing and product development. I think marketing in the most expanded sense, like we discussed this morning, where consumers don't always want you to give them what they want. And I think of, like, I'm sure we've all known, like the spoiled rich kid growing up who had every toy and every, lived in the perfect house and was always miserable and bored. I wondered if consumers could become that spoiled rich kid that has everything they want and yet is looking for something that they don't know. And so to me, that's the spark of creativity. We will always be looking for that ineffable, unexpected, unknown quality that is not being delivered. And that's where I think this idea that big data will answer every one of our questions is perhaps misleading.
Can you use big data to try to help find that ineffable thing, that thing that consumers don't know they want?
Yeah, I believe that you can, absolutely. I was just going to say, people don't know what they want, but they also don't know what they don't want, and that you have to try, you have to explore. We have what we call explore and exploit, which is understanding how much more of something that you want, and if you like new music that isn't, not related, or is like you start a Dire Straits station and we see that you're starting to like new music that's brand new music, you wouldn't hear it on the radio and it's starting to enter into your sphere and you're thumbing it up, we would explore more of that, right? We want to have you, expand your horizons and discovery. If you thumb that down or skip that song, we might not do that, and we'd exploit the music that we know you love, and that's how we'd fine-tune the experience for you, but it's all based on what you tell us, right? What you tell us through your thumb, through your skip, through your behavior with the entire product itself. And so I feel like you don't know what you want. You might not know what kind of music you want to listen to at a particular time, but with the notion of big data behind it, serving you up continual discovery, then you can start to really, discover and enjoy new types of music.
And for you, Thomas, is there a way to use data to actually surprise the consumer, to not have the consumer be that bored rich kid, but take data and somehow give them something that you think will really be exciting to them?
Yeah, I think it's, kind of to Heidi's point, there's those making those connections you might not have made before, and we talked earlier about, I've been a Pandora, customer for a long time, and there is music that I have found I never would have known about if it hadn't been for Pandora positing it or showing it to me and try this, or so there is something interesting. I think Pandora is a good example of using algorithms at their best to present things to you might not think of. So there's always going to be a marriage of the two, but it takes that part, and I think with Pandora, you have an interesting human dimension to the algorithm, right? It's not just a big computer, right? There is this human dimension to it. So it's the interplay of the two, I think, where you're going to have that work.
Don't forget to start submitting your questions via the app, and then when we get to questions from the audience, we'd love to hear from you.
I think that we're entering this world where we're, as marketers, super obsessed with the power of data and the data to automate things and the data to even automate creative, to assemble the right picture and message and offer, et cetera. And to me, I feel like that's going to drive us into an efficient world, but it scares me a little bit because there's that whole emotional connection that may or may not exist with that, right? And I feel like there's, we've talked a lot about the balance of data and science and information combination in gut. And I think as marketers, we still need to take into consideration how do you create an exceptional experience based on emotion and based on gut. And we think about advertising today and millennials and the fact that millennials think advertising sucks and that they'd rather have an experience over a thing. We have to reimagine what data can do to drive experiences versus just driving, pre-assembled advertising messages to people. And there are a lot of really interesting, cool things that marketers are doing with music and beyond music around that. One of the examples that we've done for our own brand, if I can share it, because I think it's a really cool one, is the notion around delivering personalized concerts, right? Anybody can put a concert on. If you have enough money to hire an artist or a band, you can put on a show. But what's really special about the data-infused approach, the personalized approach, is you can find that artist that's trending, who has the most thumbs, who has the most station ads in a particular area, and then you can use targeting to only invite the fans of that artist to a show. And just if they've thumbed up a song or added a station, they get to have this really personal experience with the artist that they love. And the artists love it because this is the new way to connect with fans like they've never been able to do before. And it works for mega artists as well as the long tail of artists who are trying to be discovered and build audiences over time. But that's a creative way to deliver an experience back to a millennial that's using data that an advertiser can bring to life. And so you get that, that halo effect of an advertiser bringing value to a consumer experience while at the same time, delivering a promise to the consumer and the artist.
There seems to be sort of a tension in what you're describing between making investments or devising a strategy in marketing that's much safer because it is based on data and based on data science versus what's essentially a riskier prospect, right, of trying to go outside the box, trying to do something really exciting and new. How do you de-risk the exciting part of it, or is that possible?
I think the word safe is it's an interesting word to use. I mean, I don't know that we can be safe. I mean, I think you have to be relevant, and whether that means taking risks or not taking risks, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I think there is no safe. I mean, this means, to me, that just translates to being boring, and that isn't going to be successful. So, to me, it's about relevance. It's about, are you being meaningfully engaging with the person you're trying to engage with? And to do that, it has to be highly relevant to them. And whether that's being done in an unexpected way or it's being done in a fairly traditional way, I think doesn't really matter. I think it's about being relevant.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
Jamie Beckland with JanRain. We talked a little this morning about the idea that more data is better. There's no limit to how much data you can have. But I also wonder about the half-life of data and whether the window of receptivity for the consumer is getting shorter. That moment from going from a nascent interest to a reasonably well-developed interest, right, goes from months to weeks to windows, because now you can learn all you want to know about knitting on YouTube in 15 minutes. So when you think about those kinds of experiences and inserting a marketing or message into that information discovery process, I'm interested in where you see that working well, what limitations you've seen, and actually taking that data and putting it to use.
Take that one?
Sure. I mean, I think the usefulness of data is based on the business context in which you're using it, right? So if I were going to look at the overall, I could say old data, it could be very useful if I'm looking at the arc of, let's say, a life stage, a parent. What are the different stages of parenthood? And you're trying to understand those decisions. What you're describing is a very context-specific marketing message. So I think it really comes down to what is the business question you're trying to answer, because and the data set you look at is going to vary based on that. So if it's about what do I display to this person in this moment, that's going to be a very tighter data frame than if you're trying to understand, for example, if you're doing a brand, which as a brand often has a longer term view. So you may look at the overall arc of a customer lifespan over a set of years to understand their behaviors and motivations and decisions.
And then the person who was just a few seats over.
Hi, my name is Srividya, and I work at Level 3 Communications. I have a quick question for Heidi. You said that you acquire a lot of data from outside sources, but you already have first-party data and device data and all of that. So when you go out to get external data, this might sound a little data scientist-y, but how do you know how to match what you're getting to what you already have so that it all falls together?
That's a great question. And so, and as I said, we rely primarily on our first-party data because we have such an incredible amount. One of the pieces of data that we have is email address. And so in a double safe privacy manner, we will partner with certain data partners out there to be able to match on the back end at that hashed ID to then bring that data set and layer it on. So an example of that might be, auto intenders, right? Bring that into our Pandora targeting and then layer it on with all the other smart targeting that we have.
We have a polling question. I'll go back to questions from the audience, but a quick polling question that is available on your app, which is how much does big data inform your marketing decisions? A, most of our marketing decisions. B, some. C, very few. Or D, none of our marketing decisions. So if you take a moment, I'm really curious to see the response from the room. It's just available on your app or at tbr2015.cnf.io. But more questions from the audience. Yes, right here. If you just wait one moment, the microphone will come to you. Thanks.
Hi, Barry Levine. I'm a writer with VentureBeat. I'm really curious what I think is the central issue of the question, which is it's not so much what the marketing data can do to help market existing songs or ads or movies, but whether this kind of omniscience of data is driving the creation of the songs and the ads and the movies. I think that's the real data versus creativity issue. Could you speak to that, please?
Great question. Heidi, that seemed like one for you.
Yeah, the omniscience of data. Wow, that's heady. Absolutely. Is what's driving it? Well, it goes back to, are we a music company first or a data company, right? With a lot of data beneath it. And I think that, it's funny that you asked that question because there are some people in the music world who think that you can use the science of the music to create the perfect song. And there are people who are trying to decode music with the idea of what are the, attributes of songs that are top hits on Billboard, et cetera. They're not doing it with us, but they're doing it on their own. Billboard's on top 100 to craft the perfect song. But the truth is that when you talk to neuroscientists and they study the impact of music on your brain, if we played one song in here, and did MRIs on everyone in this room, each and every one of your brains would be lighting up at different points in time because music is, by definition, a very personalized experience. What you like is not necessarily what the person sitting next to you likes. And it can change dramatically through the whole course of a song from the beginning all the way through the chorus and to the end. And so that's where I just feel like that notion of personalization is so key in understanding how the connection between data and brain and happiness.
But certainly, just going back to the prior panels when we were talking about how different brands through data are thinking about improving their products. There's that element of creativity as well where perhaps not in the artistic realm, but just in terms of product development, product design, the creativity of the type of car that will be most useful to the driver. That's a creative process that's being informed by data for sure. How do you see that, Thomas, across different brands you work with?
In terms of it, I think it's that dialogue. I think it is that dialogue between, in truth, even the interpretation of data is in itself a creative exercise. Anyone who's worked with a large data set knows that there's always some level of interpretation and drawing out insights. And so that step in is creative. And then the development of hypotheses that you're then delivering against through the creative process, whether it's product development or marketing or branding or digital, to me, it should be viewed best as a dialogue. That's the part, I think that's the piece, and that's where I look at software development as a very interesting analog that we can all build from, is that you're answering questions with hypotheses and you're testing and you're answering your testing. You're not doing it in a kind of linear creation sort of manufacturing mindset. I think the world still very much is a manufacturing mindset to how it approaches tasks.
Other questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm Chandler with Moki. And my question is, how do you analyze data in different formats or unstructured data? So for you to get full view of my behavior, some of my data is location, some inside the store, some audio, video, text. So I think most of what we have today is more text-based data. How do you have tools to analyze cross-format data?
We have tools and an entire team of data scientists that do that, so I can't speak specifically to what they use and how they do it, but definitely I can connect you with somebody at Pandora who does that. But yeah, you have to have tools. There's such a massive quantity of data out there. I love Rashad Tabakawala, who somebody mentioned earlier today. He's got this really cool saying, which is, data, so much I want to sync. Data everywhere, there's so much I want to sync. Data everywhere, who will make me think? And I always think about that, because it's like data alone is never going to get you there. You have to have that human element and analysis to help guide what your decisions are. So people plus technology.
Other questions from the audience? Yes, thank you.
Thanks. My name is Emily Plazik, and I'm with US Steel Corporation. And I would like to know, with big data, have there been any areas that have just, over time, as people have gotten more used to big data, people have realized are clutter? Like overall, let's say geography, like the geographic location of people, ends up being very insightless. Have there been any areas that you guys have found repeatedly ends up being clutter, or does everything end up being meaningful? So it is worth trying to get everything.
Ooh, that's a hard question. I mean, I think I have sort of two slightly lame answers. Partly everything is context, as I mentioned before. It's all business context. So what's the context in which you're examining it? So some data is really useful in some situations and totally useless in others. The other is, actually just chatting over lunch about this, there's other things in life. Like I was doing work with a financial services company, and we were looking at events, and we were looking at sort of cultural behaviors and things around people's different life stages. And like having a baby. You could be living in Houston and be an evangelical family, and you could be tattooed hipsters living in Williamsburg. And if you've just had a baby, 90% of your life is going to be the same. Your issues, your motivations, your sleep deprivation, so there are these also events that happen that are so disruptive, or things that we can't ignore, that we have to modulate the data against those types of factors as well. So I think it's a very important thing to consider. Don't look at things as flat. That's the thing. I think the trap we get into is we sometimes flatten it all in a way that's not, and that doesn't really give us meaning. So I guess that would be my roundabout answer.
Right, and then you think the opposite, end of the spectrum. So that's mass, right? And then the opposite end is the tattooed hipster pregnant woman in Williamsburg. And I always think about, marketers today want that really finite niche audience, but then how are they going to build scale around that, right? Do you have a collection of niche audiences, and then how much do you invest in creativity and messaging to each of those individual audiences? Or do we just swing the pendulum back, to maybe smarter mass media?
Right.
How have you thought about that at Pandora?
How do we think about that?
As it gets more and more segmented.
Yeah, well, we have the ability to segment down to that level, and we always consult our marketing partners to build a plan that includes multiple segments or grows out a signal segment, because you want to achieve both reach and you want to achieve reach and engagement, scale and frequency. So we try to build plans that allow you to target that person, but then we expand slightly to make sure that we're including women in the tri-state area, or women in the tri-state area who are also listening to hip-hop yoga music, right? That kind of, which is true, we do have that.
Very funny.
But it's about layering, right? And so it is about like building from a one-to-one, but sort of gaining scale on many one-to-one levels. If that makes sense.
So we have a question from the app, which is, neuromarketing is purported to give emotional insights. Will this get closer to data-driven creativity? How would either of you tackle that one?
I was told there would be no math.
Yeah. I think the neuromarketing science field is fascinating, and it's nascent and it's growing, and the idea that we can use biometrics to help us inform our ads, both visually and audio ads, I think is really exciting. They've got hats and and smartwatches and vests that they can hook you up to and then watch your body respond, and more marketers are beginning to use that, not only to understand how do I sort of sort of craft the perfect ad or the perfect song or whatever it may be, but then how does it resonate with people emotionally after it's shown on TV, on web, et cetera. And I think that's a field that is ripe for more innovation and exploration.
Does facial recognition software get into all that as well?
Maybe, right? I mean, it's already there in a sense with eye tracking, right? So yeah, it's all gonna, we'll have marketing singularity in no time, right?
Right. Everything's a market of one.
Yes.
By the event next year, we can talk about how all this has already been automated.
Exactly, and we'll be on the beach because we won't be needed anymore. So.
Yeah, exactly. Any other? Yes. Thank you. Right in the middle. Thank you.
Randa McMinn with Essex Property Trust. So we have a business intelligence group of individuals, but I've found that being a data scientist doesn't actually mean that you're going to be able to take that data and create those actionable insights. Are there skill sets in data scientists that you guys are able to see immediately that says, hey, these are going to be my strategists versus data crunchers?
The ability to tell stories with data is such a rare talent. That's exactly what we look for in not necessarily the scientists who are analyzing the data, but the people that bring it to life, whether you're in product, in marketing, to be able to translate and communicate effectively is really the secret. And they're very rare people, and when you find them, give them lots of love because they're highly valuable.
We have a good question from the app. So, do you use big data with geolocation services? So if someone goes to the gym, does Pandora know this and say, oh, here's your hip hop yoga playlist that we've crafted for you? How do you use that?
Today, we don't currently use geolocation. We have a philosophy that we believe strongly that to ask somebody to opt in for location, you have to give them something back through the product experience, and we're working on what that might be in terms of features. But we do ask for geography in terms of your registration data. So we use that geography to understand where you are. We wouldn't know that you're at a gym, but we would know that you're in Williamsburg and be able to deliver you an ad. Now, if you wanted to have a little more synchronicity with it and you're listening to hip hop yoga, we can make the assumption that you're working out. Or sometimes with brand advertisers, we create custom music experiences brought to you by the advertiser that are reflections of or add value to an experience that you want to have. So for example, Skechers, they sell lots of shoes to different kinds of people, and different kinds of people run at different paces, right? You might be a marathon runner, I'm not a marathon runner, and so we created a custom playlist that Skechers gives. People opt into that. So if you have a 5K run, the beats per minute, the data that we use to craft that, the beats per minute, the instrumentation, the lyrics are very different from the long distance running experience. And then people use that as they work out. So you can start to infer, are they working out? Are they doing it at a regular pace every other day or every day when they're working out? And then that gets to be really interesting for the marketer because then they get these insights back to continue to shape their future marketing plans.
We had another question, I think. Yes. Oh, there you are. Thanks. Just one moment. The microphone's right behind you.
Thank you. Raresh Bengai, Trade. Building on two comments you've made. One that looking at data and making hypotheses requires creativity. And interpreting data that Thomas made. And another one that Heidi made, that it's finding people that are able to tell stories with data is difficult. How do you train the marriage of the two skills? Because you find with data scientists, they either come from a very hardcore numerical background, so the storytelling becomes more difficult, or from the other end of the spectrum in terms of training. So in terms of building the skills to marry the two.
It's not easy, and Heidi is absolutely right that finding these people is very hard, and that's what strategists do, at least at Landor. That's the heart of it, and they do bridge that function, that kind of as a quantitative, qualitative, or and part of it is, at the end of the day, what is it really? It's really knowing what's important. And what I always press people that are in the strategy group at Landor is continuously asking them, what question are you trying to answer? That's the essential strategic task, is knowing what question we're trying to answer. That's actually, I think probably many of us experience that. That's often actually a very hard question to answer even within the clients we're working with, or what are we really trying to solve for? And So I think part of it is learning how to frame the task and what are you trying to do. And I find people that are very data analytics oriented, they don't always know what's the right question to answer. They don't even know what question they're trying to answer. They just have a lot of data. And so they don't know where to go in the data and where to find that. So it's, I mean, there's not a clean answer. It's finding somebody who loves insights, loves working with data, but also has a mind toward strategically what are we trying to accomplish and what's the goal.